Okay, guys, so today we're going to be going over slope-intercept form. So that is just a way to write equations, and it is something that we've been doing in class already, so it shouldn't be anything that feels too difficult. So the first thing we're going to talk about is slope. So slope is the same thing as rate of change, which is like I've been saying the whole time. But slope can be positive, negative, it can be equal to 0, and it can be undefined. So positive slope is when a line is rising to the right, and negative slope is when a line is rising to the left, okay? If the line is completely horizontal, the slope is 0, and if it's straight up and down, then it has no slope or it is undefined. So those are just some important scenarios for you to kind of memorize. So just remember, if the line is going to the right and it's rising to the right, it is positive, and if it rises to the left, it is negative. So when we're writing equations, we're going to use the form y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So that's kind of like what we were talking about last week. So here I'm going to write the point slope form of the equation. So I'm given my slope is positive 8, and my y-intercept is 5. So here my m is equal to 8, and my b is equal to 5. And just remember, we're going to be using mx plus b. So all we're doing is plugging in numbers. And m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. And I'm going to say that probably until all of our ears fall off, because it's just so important that you remember what each piece is. Okay, so here m is equal to 8, b is equal to 5, and all I'm going to do is plug those into my equation to get y equals 8x plus 5. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, where I have a slope of negative 2 and a y-intercept of 5. So m is equal to negative 2, b is equal to 5. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in and get y equals negative 2x plus 5. So we can do the same thing with a graph. So I'm going to kind of zoom in here. So you notice this graph doesn't have any points plotted, so I have to find 2 myself. So I have 1 point here at negative 5, 0, and at 1, 5. So I'm going to use those 2 points. I'm going to go ahead and plot them real quick. Now I'm going to do my rise over my run to find my slope, or remember my change in y over my change in x. So here my change in y is 10, and my change in x is 1. So my slope is going to equal 10 over 1, which is equal to 10. And my y-intercept is right here, where my line starts to cross the y-axis, and that is 0, negative 5. So my y-intercept is negative 5. So I'd have y equals 10x, and instead of plus negative 5, I'm just going to do minus 5. So same thing over here. I'm going to find my 2 points first. So I'm going to use negative 0, negative 4 right here. And I'm going to use negative 1, 5 right here. So I'm going to do my change in y over my change in x. So notice my line is rising to the left. That means my slope is going to be negative. So I'm going down 9. So I have negative 9 over 1 as my slope. So my slope is going to be -9. And then my y-intercept is where my graph crosses the y-axis right here at -4. So I'm going to have y equals -9x minus 4. Remember, I'm using -4 instead of plus -4. We're going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to find 2 points again. So here I have 0, -4, and I have -1, 3. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my rise over my run, which in this case my line is rising to the left, so my slope is going to be negative. So my change in x is 1, and my change in y is -7. So my slope is going to equal -7 over 1, which is -7. And my y-intercept is right here where my line is crossing the y-axis. So that is -4. So I have the equation y equals -7x minus 4. So remember, I'm just still using y equals mx plus b and subbing out the numbers as I need to. And we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to use the point -4, 5. Or no, I'm not. I'm going to use the point 0, 0, and I'm going to use the point 4, -5. So you notice my line is rising to the left, so my slope is going to be negative. So I'm going to take my rise over my run. So we notice our change in x is 4. And my change in y is -5. So I'm going to have -5 over 4. And our y-intercept is right here at 0, 0. So that means my y-intercept is equal to 0. So my equation is going to be y equals -5 over 4 x. And that's it. So because the y-intercept is 0, we're not going to do plus 0 because that doesn't really do anything. So we're just going to leave it as -5 over 4x. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this. So it's already in slope-intercept form. So I am going to go ahead and start with my y-intercept right here. And this tells me that it's -2. So I'm going to go to 0, -2. And then I'm going to start working points out on here. So I'm going to do -3 times -1 minus 2. And that's going to give me 3 minus 2, which is equal to 1. So I'm going to put a point right here. And then I'm going to do -3 times 1 minus 2. And that is going to give me -3 minus 2, which is -5. So I'm going to plot the point right here, 1, -5. And then I just draw my line through it. All you really need to do on these graphs is do like 3 points. You don't need to do more than that. 3 will be able to give you your rate of change, and you'll be able to draw a line through it. So I am going to graph just 2 of these equations. I'm going to do 1 and 4 right here. And I'm going to do 1 in red, and I'm going to do 4 in blue. So you can kind of see how we graph these. So the first thing that I always do is look to see what the y-intercept would be. So on 1 right here, this +3, that's our b, that's our y-intercept. So I'm going to go on the y-axis and plot the point 0, 3 right here. Now I'm just going to start finding different points. So I'm going to start with 1 because the 1 is always easy. So 2 times 1 plus 3 is equal to 2 plus 3. So we have the 0.15 right here. Now I'm going to do the 0.22. So 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. So we have the 0.27 right here. And then we'll do 2 times negative 1 plus 3. And that gives me negative 2 plus 3, which is 1. And then you're able to draw a line through it. In a perfect world, you would have a ruler. But, we're just going to do our best with what we have here. So my line does look a little wonky. In real life, it would be a straight line, but we'll call it fine for right now. So now I'm going to graph y equals negative 3x plus 5. So I have the y-intercept, which is positive 5. So I go to 0, 5. And then I'm just going to start finding points. So negative 3 times 1 plus 5 is equal to negative 3 plus 5. So we have the 0.1, 2 right here. And I can already tell my line is going to rise to the left because my m right here, my slope, is negative. So I'm going to do negative 3 times negative 1 plus 5, which is going to give me the which is going to give me 3 plus 5, which gives me the 0.1, 8 right here. And like I said, you only need to do 3 points. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my line. And like I said, in a perfect world, you would have a ruler and it would be a much straighter line than that, but we're going to call that fine for right now. And we're not going to worry about those other graphs. So now what we're going to do is figure out how to find a graph when you're given a point that is not the y-intercept and the slope. So what you're going to do is substitute the point and the slope into y equals mx plus b, and then you're going to solve for b. So it's just like doing a one-step equation. So here, I know that the slope is 5, so I'm going to put that right here as my coefficient. And then I'm going to take the x coordinate, which is negative 3, and put it where x would go. So basically, this is my m, we know, because that's our slope. And the point we're given, x is equal to negative 3, so that's going to go right here. And then we know that all of this is going to end up equal to y, in which case our y is 2. So we're going to solve it like this. So I'm going to take negative 5 times negative 3. Which is equal to negative 15 plus b. To get rid of that negative 15, remember we'll add on both sides to cancel out. And that will give me that 17 is equal to b. So now to write our equation, I'm going to have y equals, remember, m is negative 5. It gave us that. And we solved for b, and we got 17. So y equals negative 5x plus 17. So we're going to do the same thing here. We know that negative 2 times our x, which is 4, plus b is going to equal our y, which is negative 4. So now we're going to do negative 2 times 4, which is negative 8, plus b is equal to negative 4. To get rid of the negative 8, we add a positive 8 to both sides to cancel out. And we get b is equal to 4. So we're going to get y is equal to negative 2x, because that's our slope, plus b, which in this case is 4. So y is equal to negative 2x plus 4. So we're going to do the same thing over here. We know that our slope is 0. We know that negative 5 is our x and positive 5 is our y. So negative 5 times our slope, which is 0, plus b is equal to 5. So 0 times negative 5 is 0. So 0 plus b is equal to 5. And since adding 0 does really nothing, we know that b is equal to 5. So we're going to get y is equal to we're going to get y is equal to 0x plus 5, but 0x doesn't really mean anything because remember 0 times any number is always 0. So we're just going to get that y is equal to 5. So now we're going to practice in the event that we are given 2 points. So you're not given the slope or the y-intercept. You're just given 2 points and asked to figure it out. So we are going to start with given that our line goes through 1, -1, and 2, -4. So I want to focus right here on this thing where you have y2 minus y1 and x2 minus x1. This is no different than the change in y over the change in x. So you're going to take, we're going to label these before we start. So I'm going to make a list and label my x1, my y1, and that stuff. So your x1 and your y1 come from this first point where x is 1 and y is -1. x2 comes from the second point. So x2 is going to be equal to 2 and y2 is going to be equal to -4. So now that we've figured that out, we're going to plug it into this, okay? And remember, x1 and y1 and x2 and y2 just comes from what point's listed first and what point is listed second. Okay, so you just follow the order they pop up in the problem. So I'm going to take my y2, which is -4, minus my y1, which is -1. And then I'm going to take my x2, which is 2, minus my x1, which is 1. So 4 minus -1 is equal to -3, and 2 minus 1 is equal to 1. So -3 over 1 is equal to -3. So our slope, or our m, is equal to -3. So now we're going to just do the original thing we were doing, where we are going to plug in one of the points into an equation and solve for b. So I've already plugged my m in right here, as you can see. And now I'm just going to choose one of the points. And I'm going to use 1, -1, because I think the numbers are easier to work with. So I'm going to plug in 1 for x right here and -1 for y right here. So now I'm going to take -3 times 1, which is -3. So -1 equals -3 plus b. To get rid of that, I add 3 to both sides, and I get 2 is equal to b. So from here, I get the equation y is equal to -3x, because m is -3. And we're going to do -3x plus 2, because 2 is equal to b. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to label my y2, my y1, and everything, and I'm going to use this change in y over change in x, like this right here. Okay, and I see that my x1 is -3, my y1 is +4, my x2 is 0, and my y2 is 2. So I'm just going to plug those in to this right here to get our slope. So take my y2, which is 2, minus my y1, which is 4. So 2 minus 4, over my x2, which is 0, minus my x1, which is negative 3. So I'm going to get negative 2 over 3. And when you get a fraction like that, you can just leave it. Sorry, my iPad had a moment. When you get a fraction like this, like 2/3, you can just leave it. Don't change it to a decimal, just leave it as a fraction. So we know our slope is negative 2/3. And now what we're going to do is substitute that into an equation to solve for b. So you can see right here, I use negative 2/3 as my m. I use negative 3 as my x, and I use 4 as my y. So now I'm going to use this to solve for b. So negative 2/3 times negative 3 is actually just positive 2. So I've got positive 2 plus b. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and that is going to give me 2 is equal to b. So now I can write an equation. Y is equal to negative 2/3 x, because that is m, plus 2, because that is b. Okay, we have one more. So I'm going to do the same thing, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to go ahead and label my x1, which is negative 4, and my y1, which is 2. And then my x2 is going to be 0, and my y2 is going to be positive 4. So on the top here, I'm going to have 4 minus 2. And then on the bottom, I'm going to have 0 minus negative 1. So that is going to end up giving me 2 over 1, which is 2. So my slope is 2. And then I'm going to go ahead and substitute that into an equation to solve for b. So I'm going to use the point negative 1, 2. So here you can see I use my slope of 2. I use 2 as my y from this point right here, and negative 1 as my x from that same point. And that is going to give me 2 is equal to negative 2 plus b. To get rid of the negative 2, I'm going to add 2 to both sides, and I'm going to get 4 is equal to b for my y-intercept. And I can then write the equation y is equal to 2x plus 4 as my equation.